Hi, I'm Alan Ross. I'm the managing editor of APC Media's publications, Transformer Technology, Power Systems Technology, and Women in Power Systems. We're here at the IEEE PES&T conference in Anaheim in 2024, the 60th anniversary. These interviews are with thought leaders to be able to bring the best of the marketplace to you. My next guest is Chris Root. Chris, really good. We've done this a number of times throughout the years. I met Chris when he was the COO of Velco, Vermont Electric. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And we talked. You kind of opened my eyes up about a lot of things that are happening up in that area. You're retired. You're now with Quanta as a consultant advisor, industry. What does that mean when you're an industry advisor? What does it mean?
Well, it means basically, due to my experience in years of, in both engineering and operations, I'm able to give some of that experience that I've seen to other senior executives who are struggling with certain things, right? So there's a big transition in the industry. And one of the things I found about consultants sometimes is, so they see across more.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're at one company, you kind of see your company and you don't necessarily see across. That is also an advantage of IEEE. Yeah. You come to a thing like a T&D show like this, you broaden yourself. Yeah. And I always try to tell people, they ask me, how do you know about that? So I learned it at IEEE T&D, where I heard it at a panel with certain people speaking from around the world or around the country about your problems. So those things register, you remember them, you learn something, and then you go back and you can share. And sometimes I struggle and I try to get people, you really need to get out and see the world. Yeah. How do you do that in the utility industry? You come to a show.
You come here, absolutely. It's interesting because doing a lot of media things, you hear a lot of things from a lot of really smart people. We're going to talk about it in a minute, but at the CGRE North America conference, I learned a ton because those were some smart people at that CGRE conference. And so people say, well, how do you know that? And I'm thinking, I didn't know that until 10 minutes ago until somebody shared it with me. Let's switch gears to IEEE. You were on the Executive Advisory Committee, right? Is it committee? Which I think is a really neat group of people because you're industry people giving direction or looking at the future for IEEE. Talk to me a little bit about your role on that, and we're going to get to the value of IEEE in a minute, but talk about the EAC first.
This was the brainchild of Demir Novosel.
Right.
And when he was president, which is, in him and I had talked about, we need more utility executives and industry executives to be engaged in IEEE. And they didn't know what was going on, or it had been so long that they dealt with it. And so we said, how do we engage executives? Two, meet their needs and to hear what they wanted IEEE to do.
No, that's brilliant.
So we basically then organized a group of executives. They put a committee together with an executive as the head of it, and they meet maybe quarterly. And what they do is set direction of things they'd like to see. One thing in particular is that there's a group underneath them that actually will write white papers.
Okay.
And these white papers get written maybe within a year on topics that are relevant to the industry and to the utilities. Yeah. All kinds of different topics, and they're written by experts, IEEE experts, but they don't end up being IEEE papers. And then they post them on the Resource Center for PES.
Right.
And they're just great resources.
Because I remember I was on the Smart Grid program. I was a member of that for 3 years, and my mantra, and not just mine but others, was we need more practitioners. We've got a lot of academics at that one we did. We need more practitioners. Well, if you get the executive practitioners, you're going to get more practitioners.
Well,
right?
That's the theory, and that it actually has worked out.
No,
it's worked that way, so.
In Future Directions, also working with you on that IEEE Future Directions Committee?
Somewhat, but not as much. Okay. So they have other, they look across all IEEE societies. So, our thing, they're like, you guys are doing your thing, good job, so we don't need to bother you.
Just let us know. That's good. Let's switch to, stay with IEEE, but we're going to be doing a special feature, and the idea is, what is the value to you in your career, you personally, and maybe the people that you've led to IEEE? What's the value of IEEE to you?
I'll say there's probably three major values to me in my career. So my career is 40 years plus. So when I was a young engineer, and I joined as an undergraduate student to IEEE,
yeah.
right, as a student member. But what I ended up, when I first joined my first utility, New England Electric System, the Boston chapter would run these courses at night at MIT on relay protection. And these were IEEE type courses. So we went there, a whole bunch of us would go down there and and it was phenomenally good. It was taught by an engineer, local engineer. It was great. We learned a bunch of stuff, fantastic. And then, so I always felt the local chapters were important. And then, so that was one. The second thing is that as a resource, and standards are important, right? So I remember one of my first assignments as a young engineer was to talk about the changes of surge protectors. I got the IEEE, standards out and all that. So that's valuable. That was valuable. But fast forward, because of the time I was just involved in my career, not so much with IEEE, I got on the governing board and the long range planning to give an input of what was going on in society and within the industry, because I felt like I was too far removed. I was an executive, I was a senior vice president, but I felt like all I've done is do mergers and worry about my company's footprint and not what's going on. I went back into it and I was like, oh my word, I'm learning so much. It was a growth opportunity for me, and I always appreciated giving back, okay? And they can I bring people to this show that they didn't know about it or they didn't learn things. And they'd always come back with a long list of, hey, we learned this, we learned that, and I made them share it with people. So, I mean, that's just a phenomenal thing about IEEE. And they're worldwide, and they have a lot of smart people. And it's a good thing to know. I always like to have smart people around me.
Right, so right. Better to have more smart people around you than you are smart.
Right.
The one of the things, because the three things. IEEE is for the betterment of society.
Correct.
I love that.
Right.
It's also, it seems to be populated with lifelong learners. You just mentioned that, and lifelong givers. It is a very unique organization that does that. Talk a little bit about the lifelong learning aspect. Not so much for you, because you just talked about you. How about the people that work for you? How did you encourage them?
My Boston chapter had kind of went dormant. And I was embarrassed that my home chapter went dormant. So we got it back and running and became it's one of the most vibrant chapters in the world now. Won the large chapter award like 4 times. But they were really great. And the issue was that they would bring speakers in from around the world to educate people. So they'd get those perspectives because if they couldn't travel, right? And then they ran courses that were really appropriate for that geographical area. Okay, offshore wind was a big topic in New England, right? So they would bring offshore wind people in to talk about what is it, what is the theory behind it, how does it work, and that was like super education, and they were so inexpensive. I like IEEE because it's almost like free training. If you think about it this way, right? You don't have to have a big training budget. Just say join IEEE and get the stuff offline, because there's a tremendous amount of courses for young people and new people to the industry that's online, free to members. So. I mean, I'll be honest, I was hey, don't have to pay off a training budget.
That's the true executive that says, hey, look, I get a lot of free stuff there. Last question, Seagray North America. I was there we did some interviews, you and I did an interview there. You got another conference coming up in November. Your role at Seagray North America is what?
So I'm the president of the U.S. National Committee, which runs this. Seagray is organized different from IEEE. IEEE is a worldwide organization, is organized worldwide. Seagray is set up by countries, so there's 80 country national committees, but the technical work that gets done is worldwide, right? So in the U.S. we have one conference a year. It's called Grid of the Future, and it's focused at mid-career people. So there's a lot of conferences for young people, there's a lot of people for older people. This is a mid-career people. We have about 100 papers, 4 industry panels, only industry people. Get a lot of utility people to go to it. And it's in Raleigh next year, November 10th to the 14th in Raleigh, sponsored this year by Quanta Technology. But there's a lot of utilities that we're going to be going there. We get about 300 to 400 people that attend it, and it's a great opportunity to learn a lot.
Is it November 2024 or 2025?
2024.
Yeah, you said next year.
I'm sorry.
A little conservative.
I'm sorry.
2024. The other thing, I know that the Seagray US, I guess it is, but for the Seagray conference in Paris this year, the U.S. contingency had over 100 papers that were presented, accepted in Paris. That's amazing.
We set a record for papers that were accepted from the United States. The Paris Symposium happens every other year and has for 102 years, except for 2 times.
Wow.
One during World War II when the Nazis had taken over Paris, because it's always in Paris, so they didn't do it, in COVID. Okay. So the only 2 times they didn't do it, they do it every 2 years. It's a major event worldwide. And but the U.S. had more papers than ever accepted, which was quite unusual. Well, not unusual, it was just great.
Yeah,
and
shows the vibrancy of the U.S. group.
Correct, right. Yeah. The U.S., there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And
Chris, thank you so much. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate the time.